Today's case was the first one of its kind to ever take place in the UK. Daryll Rowe was the first individual convicted of deliberately attempting to spread HIV. His actions sparked heated debates surrounding the criminalization of the transmission of the disease. He fooled many, and he didn't find it difficult to lure in victims with his good looks, charisma, and seemingly kind nature. But before we go any further, welcome to Crime Rush. I'm Inga, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. Please note that this video is for entertainment purposes only, and if you are sensitive to true crime stories, rather turn away now or proceed with caution. You have been warned. It's not exactly clear where or when Daryll Rowe was born, but we do know that he was placed in foster care as a baby. He bounced around foster homes and eventually landed up with Jackie and Harry Rowe. He went to live with them in Edinburgh, which is the capital city of Scotland, when he was 8 years old, and they adopted him. They suspected that he had suffered some abuse because they found many scars on his body, including a massive one on his head. But they said that Daryll was just such a kind little boy and he fit in perfectly with them. He was anxious because he wanted to settle somewhere, a place to call his home, but he was extremely loving, sociable, and at one point he even asked them if he could call them mom and dad, and they were so happy about this. They loved Daryll and they gave him a wonderful home life, and they said he was just such a cute little boy. When they had visitors over, he was so polite. He would offer them a cup of tea, and people just wanted to be around him. And as Daryll got a little bit older, he went to his parents and he told them that he was gay. But they accepted this. All they wanted for Daryll was for him to live a happy and healthy lifestyle. After school, he became a hairdresser and he just loved his job. He was a vegan and he was a massive yoga enthusiast. Daryll, however, said that it was at this point in his life that he had, and I quote, built a really unhealthy relationship with sex. He became extremely promiscuous, and sadly in 2015 he would discover that he was HIV positive. But he didn't tell anyone. He kept it a secret. He didn't even tell his parents.
We didn't know anything about HIV until Daryll, we got a phone call from his lawyer.
Now at this point I was really trying to place myself in Daryll's shoes. And I can only imagine that there's a lot of shame and embarrassment that comes with this type of diagnosis. It shouldn't be that way, but I know that a lot of people feel this way, and you know how cruel people can be. So I really understand why he didn't want to tell anyone. But Daryll claims that when he got this diagnosis, he was in complete denial about it. He said the first thing he did was to research home remedies and cures online. And this is when he came across something that made sense to him at the time, which was urine therapy. And when I heard this, I was thinking, it sounds very strange. I wonder what it is and if I even want to know. And it turns out that it does involve him drinking his own urine as a cure. And then I decided to do more research on this, and I came across a medical researcher online named Owen Kimberley. And this is what he had to say about it. Quote, "To begin with, urine is something that your body throws out of it through a series of steps to clean the body and save it from toxicity arising from contents like urea, uric acid, and ammonia. Why do you think kidney patients need dialysis treatment to cover up for not being able to urinate or excrete out toxicity? So if drinking your own urine was the cure to certain diseases, why would the natural mechanism of the body first throw it out as a waste product? Yes, urine therapies do exist in some countries like Mexico where there are fewer rules applied. Absurdities like these take birth. But drinking your own urine is not at all going to do you any good if you are HIV positive, because your urine consists of 95% water and other toxic substances depending on what you consume." End quote. Now, that makes all the sense in the world to me, but Daryll decided that he was going to drink his own urine and that was going to cure him. He believed in it so much that he rejected prescribed medication because he felt that it would sort of cancel out the urine therapy cure. Which is not true. If you have this, don't believe that for 1 second. You should listen to a doctor. You should take prescribed medication for this. And just days after this diagnosis, in April of 2015, Daryll made his first YouTube video.
Hi guys. This is my first attempt to making my YouTube video. I'm vegan. I'm very passionate about treating my body well. You are what you eat. And there's many things that I do that many people might think that, oh, that's weird, that's not right. I don't drink, I don't smoke, don't do anything like that.
Now, most of us would assume that after receiving a diagnosis of this nature, that Daryll would stop being sexually active at this point. But no. In fact, Daryll goes onto a dating app called Grindr to meet men. And it didn't take long with his good looks for many men to show interest in him. He met an American man on Grindr named Lenny who was living in the same area as him at the time. The two of them started chatting and soon they would also exchange photos. It wasn't long until Daryll would tell Lenny over text messages that he wanted to sleep with him. But he said he wanted to do it without any protection. However, Lenny was clear that he was uncomfortable with this, but Daryll was persistent. And this just put Lenny off completely, so he started to ignore Daryll. But then Daryll was like, okay, fine, we can do it your way. And soon after this, Daryll just shows up at Lenny's house with no warning. But Lenny lets him in. And it wasn't long, and Lenny reported that Daryll got extremely forceful, and he again kept insisting that they do it without protection. Lenny put his foot down though, and he said to him he's not comfortable with that, and if he's not happy with it, he can leave, there's the door. But then Daryll once again said, okay, fine, we'll do it your way. And Lenny handed him the condom, and Daryll put it on, and they did the deed. After this encounter, the two of them stayed in touch. They were sending messages back and forth, but it didn't take long for Lenny to realize that Daryll was acting really strange. His messages became extremely possessive, and when Lenny seemed to back away, they became really nasty. Daryll was saying things to him about him being an American, and he was just sending rude messages to Lenny all the time. At one point, it got so bad, Lenny just decided, okay, that's enough, and he blocked him. A week later, Lenny would receive a phone call from Daryll that would change his life forever.
You're gonna burn. I ripped the condom. You stupid. I got you.
And more or less 2 weeks after this phone call, Lenny started to feel sick. So he went into the clinic just for a checkup. And 24 hours later, they phoned him back. And this is when they informed him that he had tested positive for HIV. Absolutely devastating.
It was about 2 weeks after Daryll stopped contacting me. I got really sick. I felt really ill. I got some antibiotics. I started feeling better. But I wasn't still 100%. I went to the clinic and I just got my usual checkup. I got a call from the clinic and a text saying, we need you to call to discuss your results. And I've been tested many times before, and they usually tell you that, you're all clear, you're good to go. And this was a different call. And at this point, this huge fear just came over me again, and my friend just yelled at them over the phone saying, just tell him what it is, he's in bits right now. And then they said, you're positive.
Lenny had to go back to the clinic for treatment, and this is when the staff there asked him, do you know where you got it? Do you have any idea? And that's when he told them the whole story about Daryll and how it went down. And the staff actually told Lenny this wasn't the first time they heard a story like this. In fact, 4 other people had reported similar stories. This is when Lenny went to the Sussex police and reported Daryll, and this happened on the 4th of February 2016.
Shit happens. But I'm angry to find out there could be more people. And what are the chances? Everybody's pointing to this Scottish guy, you know.
He gave them what they'd been missing, a description of where Daryll Rowe was living.
Turns out that there were indeed many other men, and a few of them came forward to tell their stories, and we are going to discuss a few of them today. Stuart met Daryll on Grindr in July of 2015. The two of them started chatting and soon decided that they wanted to meet in person. Stuart then went over to Daryll's flat, and that is where things soon got extremely heated, and they moved it to the bedroom. Once they were in the bedroom, Stuart asked Daryll to put a condom on, and it looked like Daryll was doing just that. But once they had finished, Stuart looked on the bed and he saw the condom, but it had nothing in it. This is when he questioned Daryll and asked him if he had it on. And Daryll asked him if he was one of those paranoid people, but he assured him that he did have it on. And that's when Stuart decided to just put it behind him, and they moved on and kept in touch, and they were messaging back and forth. But soon, Daryll's messages just turned nasty. The messages seemed to get even worse when Stuart started to ignore Daryll. But one day, the messages took a really dark turn.
Sent me a series of short messages in quick succession saying, "You're a f***ing revolting jackass, ha ha ha, ha, I took the condom off."
As soon as he got these messages from Daryll, he was petrified and he went into the clinic for a checkup. And sadly, one day later, he would be informed that he tested positive for HIV. Stuart immediately went to report Daryll to the police. Luckily, he had Daryll's address, his phone number, and he also showed them the text messages that Daryll had sent him. Police went to question Daryll, but he was already on the run. In fact, he had moved to Brighton, but police didn't know this. They couldn't find him anywhere. And sadly, it is after this that he would actually go on to victimize Lenny. Unlike the other men, Peter didn't meet Daryll on Grindr. He saw him around town and he actually went to the same gym as him. And the two of them got to talking, they headed off, and they decided to hook up. Peter said that when he went over to Daryll's place, Daryll was already waiting for him on the bed. And it didn't take him long to insist that they do it without protection. Peter said he was hesitant and he asked him if it was safe. Daryll assured him that it was, and they did it without protection. But just as with Stuart and just as with Lenny, Daryll started to send Peter very strange and nasty text messages. But there was one text message in particular that grabbed Peter's attention, and that was the one where he told him that he was HIV positive.
Eventually came back. It was kind of frustrating, isn't it? Sort of, you're trying to make a point about me not replying to his messages. He'd blocked me.
Peter didn't believe him at all, but he still went to the clinic to get tested, but he tested negative. This was obviously a massive relief, but Peter still carries so much guilt with him to this day. He feels like he should have reported this.
I'm an adult. I should have known better. And I should have told the police at the time.
Andrew said that he was immediately attracted to Daryll when he saw him on Grindr. The two of them got to chatting, and just like with the other ones, they decided to hook up. Andrew went over to Daryll's apartment, and there the two of them spent some time together, and they really got along so well. Soon, things started to heat up and they moved it over to the bedroom. This is when Andrew also realized that Daryll didn't have any condoms. The two discussed it and they both decided to proceed without protection. Andrew actually ended up spending the night at Daryll's place, and this went really well in his mind. In fact, when he got on the bus the next day to go home, he felt like this was an amazing date. He really liked Daryll and he wanted to talk to him again. But on his way home already, Daryll was sending him messages because Daryll had gone onto Grindr and saw that Andrew was still online. And he was sending him messages saying, I can't believe you are already online. But to be fair, these two weren't in a relationship at all. I mean, they had just met the day before, But Daryll seemed very upset. And this was really off-putting to Andrew because he was disappointed. It went so well, and now Daryll sent him all these messages. But then Daryll sent him one more message, and he called him a slag. And that's when Andrew was like, you know what? Last night might have been great, but I'm putting this behind me, and I'm not going to talk to this guy again. But a month later, he was just out for a drink with his boss, and he received a message from Daryll.
I hope you enjoyed 4 of my loads. I have HIV.
Part of Andrew also didn't believe Daryll. He thought he just said it because he was angry, but he went for a checkup anyway. And luckily, 24 hours later, they informed him that he tested negative. Now, I need to add this, and this is extremely important. Everybody needs to know this. If you suspect that there's a possibility that you could have contracted this, there is treatment available that you can take to prevent yourself from getting it. But it needs to be taken within 72 hours from the time of contact. But Daryll, he didn't give his victims these options because by the time he told them about it, it was already way past 72 hours. It was way too late for them. In November of 2016, a nationwide manhunt began. By then, it was estimated 22 men had reported Daryll to the police. Eventually, police caught up to Daryll and arrested him and took him in for questioning. Shockingly though, when they found Daryll, he was in a relationship with another man named Tom. In fact, he was living with him. Later, Tom was tested, and I'm happy to report that he didn't contract it. But he said that when he went back to the apartment after learning all of this, he actually went to look in the box of condoms, and he saw that Daryll had actually cut all of them open. I mean, this guy's just so sick. And at first, Daryll denies having it at all to the police.
Do you have HIV?
No.
Okay. Have you had a HIV test recently?
Not recently, but I was talking to Brian. About I had a relationship when I first got here, and it was unprotected.
Mm-hmm.
So I've not been tested after that.
Okay. And is that something
for a couple of months? I'm a little bit worried about that, and hearing this is a bit, but.
Okay. So what you're saying is a couple of months ago you had a relationship, had unprotected sex.
When I first got here.
When you first got to Sussex?
I was dating somebody pretty quickly, and it got quite intense.
Okay. You had unprotected sex with them, and you haven't had hadn't had an HIV test since.
No.
Okay. So when was the last time you were clean?
Completely clean. 6 months ago,
Okay.
give or take.
But the truth came out. Altogether, Daryll infected 5 men he had unprotected sex with and sabotaged the condoms of another 5 in Brighton and Northumberland. In 2018, Daryll Rowe, only 28 years old at the time, was sentenced to life with a minimum of 12 years at Brighton Crown Court. But the question all of his victims still have is why? Why would Daryll do this to them? And sadly, that is not very clear. But this is what Daryll had to say about it. Quote, "When I got the diagnosis, because I was in so much denial, I had in my mind that I was going to cure myself with urine therapy. I almost used that as an excuse for continuing to have unprotected sex. I thought in my mind, well, this must be blocking it," end quote. When they asked him about those horrible messages that he sent, this is what he said, quote, "I wasn't coping well when I was rejected by anybody. I think it was building up. The thing I really couldn't cope with was when I was talking to or dating somebody and then they would just completely ignore me for no reason. The messages came out of that. At that point, it was about HIV. That's the first thing that came to my head. I thought this will get a reaction. It just got out of control." End quote. He also attempted to apologize to his victims. And he said, quote, "I would like to say to the men in Scotland and in England that I'm sorry for being so naive and so reckless, and that they are the ones now suffering for that. But the main thing for me is that I hope they can forgive me one day, and that they can try and live a happy life and put this behind them." End quote. You know, I'm not so sure how they can really put this behind them, Daryll, because perhaps maybe the ones that tested negative. But what about the ones that have to live with this for the rest of their lives? I don't know. I'm just going to give you my opinion, and I'm going to give it to you straight. I don't believe Daryll. I think that when he got this diagnosis, he became bitter very quickly, and he wanted to take as many men down with him as he possibly could. The way he did things was extremely conniving and manipulative. I mean, if you think of the mean messages right afterwards, I mean, it's disgusting. And the way he waited more than 72 hours because he knew they wouldn't be able to get treatment after that. He only revealed it to them then. And that shows me his true character and nature. I do believe the part where he said that he doesn't handle rejection well, but that couldn't be why he did this to them, because those men didn't reject him until he started acting strangely, and that was already after he had slept with them. So that to me is not an excuse. I feel horrible for the men who went through this and are now living with this. But I also have to add that you shouldn't think that this is just a death sentence. Yes, it's a devastating diagnosis, but with the right treatment and a healthy diet and a healthy lifestyle, there are people that can live a wonderful life for many, many years with this virus. Please, please, please make sure that you educate yourself on the topic before you even think of judging someone who has it. In the meantime, reportedly Daryll has filed for appeals, but they have been denied. And I, along with his victims, feel that he should be behind bars for this. That being said, I hope the prison has informed all the inmates that he is positive. I mean, that would be a disaster. But let me know what you think of this case. Have you heard of it? And that's about all I have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.